Bachelor of Architecture with honors from the University of Texas at Austin. As a practicing professional, he has received design and teaching recognitions from the American Institute of Architects, and his architectural work has been published in national and international magazines. Before joining FIU, Professor Rosales worked with highly recognized architecture firms. In New York City, he worked with IMPay and partners, and he also worked with a partnership between SoM and Frank Gehry, participating in the winning entry for the redevelopment of Madison Square Garden, which was just a project. He also worked here in Miami with Arquitectonica. Mr. Rosales, or Professor Rosales, was also the program director of the School of Architecture here at FIU and founder of the FIU Ecotourism Council. I'm going to quote Camilo from his his writings. Since architecture and urban design exist in porous ensembles, he has been intrigued by spatial structure of natural and human-made habitats, focusing on the articulation of spatial continuity. If architecture is a means for protecting human activities from the environment, it is also an instrument for the enabling transactions with it. These interactions are not only due to material constructs, but also by virtue of spatial configurations, often involving layered and/or porous organizations. Camilo wrote a book that was published in 2022. The book is the first slide of the presentation: Spatial Transparency in Architecture, Light, Layering, and Porosity, which compiles a series of case studies, including some of his own buildings. In the book, he analyzes both the phenomenon of visual connectivity and continuity through intermediate spaces and spatial transparency's capacity for promoting and enabling graded, interflowing environmental transactions. Using historical and contemporary examples, it catalogs some of the most common and recurring configurations that manifest these characteristics. Camilo's discipline and rigor is manifested in his joy and ability to draw, in the joy and ability to analyze, and in the joy and ability to photograph, which are the skills that every architect and architecture student should practice and master. Camilo is motivated by the possibilities of collaborating with his students and peers. The drawings, diagrams, and charts on his book and on the exhibition that we will see later today were produced in collaboration with FIU students. The wonderful photograph that you will see on the walls of BA Gallery are all taken by him, which demonstrates not only skills and techniques as a photographer, but understanding of spaces and the training of the architect's gaze. As chair of the Department of Architecture and as a colleague of Camilo for 10 years, which is the time that I've been here, I look forward to continue learning from your research, from your practice, and from the fruitful traveling experiences that you have developed at FIU. Please join me and welcome Professor Camilo Rosales.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, Henry. Thank you very much. And my thanks to everyone for coming today to this lecture. I'll be presenting my book, Spatial Transparency in Architecture, Light, Layering, and Porosity. And this book is about environmental permeability, and it applies to architecture, landscape architecture, and architectural interiors as well. The book took me a long while to write, actually several years. And as you can imagine, the book has better arguments, more coordinated, more examples, and more references. So if anyone is interested in the subject, you can find the book in the library, and you can also buy it in Amazon. Let's see if this is not moving. Maybe I have to open this, right? Yeah, but I need the clicker. Oh, that's good. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. As a definition, spatial transparency is a form of depth perception through sequential intermediate realms where light is present. I know, man, that this is highly abstract and it'll be hard to grasp at the beginning, but I'm going to repeat this a few times, and with the examples, I'm sure you're going to get a decent sense of it. Is this still working? Yep, okay. So the lecture I'm going to divide in the same way that I divide the book. But I added a portion called formative ideas, and I put a 0 on that because it's not part of the book. But then I'm going to explain what is spatial transparency, why it's relevant, some case studies, and then a little bit of my work. So for formative ideas, I'm going to go back in time quite a bit to my early childhood and where I come from. I was born in a small town in Nicaragua, in the mountainous region. And at this point, the country was rather prosperous. There were good prices for agricultural products. And the government was making an effort to bring people from the outside. And so many locals from the area came. And there was an international group that came as well, from Europe and from the United States, to cultivate coffee. My family were already established coffee growers, several members. And coffee growing is very beautiful. The mountains that you see there, they have coffee underneath because mountain-grown coffee grows under the rainforest. This is a farm of a good friend of mine that I used to go many times. And coffee needs water for processing the cleaning of the seeds. On the extreme right, there's coffee plantations. On the left, there's a preserve. Because you need water, you need to preserve the sources of water. And so, coffee plantation, at least in this part of the world, is very green and lush. Even the pond that you have there, which is artificial, grows plants that flower most of the year. This is a painting by a very well-known painter from my country, Armando Morales. And there I saw in here something that, of course, I have witnessed in real life, that the natural landscape is layered, and when it's dense, like in the rainforest, is also porous. There are gaps between pieces. And this is something that really attracted me from early on. This is my grandmother's garden. It took her probably 30 years, I don't know. What she did was, instead of planting coffee in this area, she actually took away the understory and created voids, very large ones, one void connecting to the other and to the other. The garden was probably there already, between large boulders and the trees, and she was just carving out and finding spaces there. I made a sketch on my last visit, not too good. But the farmhouse is at the bottom right, and there's a kitchen garden next to it. And then a series of gardens. They were not that perfect the way you have them there. There's more plantations around. And then when we were kids, the great reward was to go to a tiny pool at the very end of the garden that was carved out from the solid rock. Made a section of that. And there was an entrance on the left that was made of a vegetable tunnel. And you could enter the garden. I always felt I was entering the mountain. It was like a green cave, like a huge green cave. And you could loop around that. And also make, this sketch, which I've made the lines that you see there now in hardline, I did later. But there were these rooms connecting to other rooms in the open, with a canopy of trees above. The first time I saw this phenomena, I thought, at least I think, in architecture, was in Antigua, Guatemala, in the Monasterio of Santa Clara. This large complex, the walls were still standing, eroded, but there were openings leading to other openings because light could penetrate within the layers, between the layers. And as you move, of course, the scenes change, and it was, a very interesting thing. So, in other words, spatial transparency is a manner of seeing extension through pervious, layered, or porous configurations. In the 1970s, I went to study at the University of Texas, and there were two professors, Colin Rowe and Robert Schlossky, who have formulated two types of transparency to contrast the early work of Walter Gropius and Le Corbusier. These articles were very popular in American academia at the time. And I remember reading them and not paying too much attention, to be honest with you. They were biased. The idea was to contrast two species of architecture, they say, the Bauhaus on one hand and Le Corbusier on another. And these two individuals, one was an architectural historian, and the other was an artist, Schlossky. They called these transparencies literal and phenomenal, and defined the terms as follows. Literal transparency, they say, is an inherent quality of certain materials and substances that allow light and vision to pass through. Its clearest expression is looking through a one-layer glass window. So this is a transparency of materials, more or less the way we know it, glass transparency. Of course, they were referring to the Bauhaus building, that in their minds was just a box filled with glass, with not too much spatial interest. I transferred this to a line diagram, and you have the window at the bottom. But there was also the painter, which I think was probably more important in the articles, Schlossky. And he used also paintings to put it together with the architecture. And this one is a constructivist painting that he called La Sarraz by Lasso Moholy-Nagy, a member of the Bauhaus. And he said it's a two-dimensional thing. It's like a grill placed on a window looking at the starry sky. Of course, they favor phenomenal transparency, which is mostly apparent or imagined. It is a quality of multi-layer organizations where ambiguously stratified relationships are apprehended as compressed juxtapositions. Again, a complicated definition. But the example should clarify. They were referring to the work of Corbusier. This is the Villa at Garges, well-known project, early Corbusier. And you can count, or see, that there are about 7 layers making this house. But with the naked eye, you only see a few. They say because phenomenal transparency is not in the glass, it's in your mind. It's in your mind's eye that the way you see it. Let me put another example, but it's not part of their articles. This is San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice, and by Palladio. The temple front seems to be made of 2 temple fronts together. If you transfer this to a line diagram, you can easily see that one is complete behind the other. One has the very tall heroic columns, and the other one the large pediment, although there is no glass here. It is completely opaque. So this will be a way to express, at least one of the ways to express phenomenal transparency. But then I said, neither one of this explained what I had witnessed in my rainforest and ruins. It's got to be another way to explain this. And then I came up with that idea. But before I get to that, remember there's been a parity between buildings and paintings. This is Le Corbusier, a moment of his painting style called purism, which was some kind of distillation of cubism. Cubism, have already abstracted the form, flattened them, and compressed them. But they were kind of wild, and Corbusier said that what he wanted to do was a discipline in Cubism, and made this similar strategy, but like a plan, elevation, and section of regular objects, like Cubism did. You see there, a stack of plates, a book, a bottle, a guitar. But if you see the lines, you don't know exactly they're in front or they're in the back. You have to admit that there's some level of transparency there, because the objects are dwindling. And this is a strategy that was used later on in collages and so on. Transfer this to a line diagram, like I've done before, and you see at the bottom the axonometric with the object that had been flattened completely and then compressed with no space in between. So as I was saying, neither one of these explain what I have witnessed. So I came up with this idea of spatial transparency, which is a quality of multi-layer and or porous spatial configurations that allow simultaneous perception of several sequential realms. It always involves the presence of intermediate spaces. Because it's got a space, then I call spatial. I found this very interesting example at FIU in the museum before the new building. And it's by a Korean-American artist by the name Jenny Cho. The title is In Between, Through the Eyes of Others. Simple, realistic scene, and which you see through one opening, a couple behind that, what appears to be dining room. On the sides are rooms that have openings. Not a big deal. But the beauty of this is that the painter did that in separate layers. So it does qualify as a painting related to spatial transparency. But this also transferred to architecture. It has transferred to architecture all along. This is not a new thing. But this is a new house by SoA Fujimoto, House N in Oita, Japan, and no glass. There's even planting between the layers. The third layer is the one that had glass, which have air conditioning. I like this project because it was about the same scale of the Corbusier Villa at Garges, and similar in profile to the Bauhaus building. So transfer that again to line diagram. And you can count on the axonometric below physical layers, 1, 2, and 3, that leaves in the middle spatial layers, A, B, and C. Of course, I had to do the comparison with paintings because everything is been going like that. And I chose this painting by Ando Hiroshige, Takata Writing Ground. Hiroshige is a very, very important painter in Japan, the Edo period. You see there a group of archers in the middle towards the right, aiming arrows to a target, and that is next to a pine tree on the extreme left. And you see the arrows at the bottom. Between the target and the archers, there's empty space. Alongside the archers, there's a line of trees. Behind the trees, there's empty space as well, and then eventually Mount Fuji. The Japanese have learned this trick from the Chinese that have something called the principle of the three depth, foreground, middle ground, and background, separated by empty space. The Japanese sometimes use clouds and extreme things, but they do that separation to give a sense of depth. They didn't know perspective. The Japanese then knew perspective and kept using this, which is very interesting, combine Western perspective with this three-layer thing, or three-depth thing. Transfer that to line diagram, and you have the spatial layers, A, B, and C. So this is the cover of the little thing you received there, which I make a summary of the whole thing. You have literal, phenomenal, and spatial with the buildings and the paintings and so on. Then I start getting my attention to the physical components of buildings, to the volumes, and found this definition by Corbusier. I'm not a fan of Corbusier per se, but I'm following the logic of these articles that center on Corbusier, and so I have to continue with that as well. But he said that architecture is the mastery, correct, and magnificent play of masses brought together in light. And he was referring to normal buildings, which are containers, normally with a geometric shape. In this particular case, he was referring to Rome, in which buildings were like a cylinder, a cube, a pyramid, and so on. But I said, no, there's something missing here, definitely. And then using the same terminology, you can have a parallel definition in which architecture could be the mastery, correct, and magnificent play of voids and openings brought together with light. And then I have a series of examples there in which the voids are part of both architecture and also nature. The one in the middle is a bone microstructure. There's always space between things. Corbusier was being a super clever individual and changed his definition in time, and he actually did it quite a few times. But if you see this picture, you will not think that these are buildings, but they have the same scale. This could be very much, a house or an apartment building. It's not a round shape. It's just because the building doesn't have openings. And when you have no openings, there's no life. This building by Kazuyo Sejima from Sanaa is almost exactly the same as the drums that you saw before, but it's got openings. Not only openings, but it's also got a space inside, a courtyard, which is in the round. Now, this is the opposite. This is like a prank by SoA Fujimoto that he calls public restroom in a Japanese garden. It's obviously to make everyone uncomfortable. The truth is you have the privacy because there's a fence around it, which is closing the space. But most of us will feel uncomfortable, and that was part of the deal. Because buildings have always been a combination of both closures and openings, and so are gardens to a certain degree. I like this picture very much from Cappadocia in Turkey. Because if you start from the top of the mountain, there are caves. And a cave, in principle, is a hole, basically. It's a void that has a void to enter in, and perhaps sometimes windows. As time goes by, the cave becomes a building, which is like an architecturalized cave, always with openings, always with holes. And holes are everywhere that humans do. It's part of our existence. Like the city of Genoa, we're going there in the fall. There's a lot of containers full with thousands of holes, including the ship there. From the view of the apartment that I have in Genoa in 2019, there was a glass window. I was looking at the port of Genoa, and there were gas storage tanks, oil storage tanks across. No one there, Open the window, the same view. Close the window, same view. So I asked myself, what is really transparent in buildings? Is it the glass or is it the opening? And it looks like a tricky question, but the truth is that glass without opening is not transparent. When you put a piece of glass against an opaque wall, nothing comes through. So before glass closure, there must be available openings for access, views, light, and air. So openings are normally like frames. They have some shape of frame. It could be round, it could be square, it doesn't matter. But frames are very peculiar. Open frames not only focus our attention, they make evident the transparency of air. Without closing, they also divide space into foreground and background, before and after. So frames articulate space, like these frames here in Rotterdam by an artist, Oscar Toisson. He just extended the openings of the doors and windows into these other elements, but breaking the space and creating spaces behind spaces, which is one of the aspects of spatial transparency. When students came to visit the exhibit, they were making fun that there was no glass. Because transparent space has been taken as a given, its perceiving qualities have been transferred to tangible materials such as glass. Associating transparency exclusively with glass becomes a pretext explanation for something that for millennia happened without it. Openings are key instruments of perception. Their inner borders serve to sensitize the eye to an imaginary threshold without forcing the gaze to dissolve in the void beyond. So not only voids or frames articulate space, but once you are in a space, It's not only an optical quality. Spatial transparency is not only perceived with the eyes, not exclusively with the mind, like the phenomenal transparency, but with the whole body. Once active in space, we see with the whole body in time. I mean, once you're in space, is a different thing. Once you are in a garden or an architecture, it's something similar. Then I turn my attention to glass. I mean, glass is a very peculiar thing, because it's a solid that acts as a void. I mean, solid, but it's void. This is the Louvre Pyramid by Impey. I took this picture having lunch. And a series of glass objects there. I mean, there's a bottle, but you see behind the bottle, it distorts the image. The glasses that have water is hard to see through so easily. And the Impey Pyramid is said to be built with the most clear glass in existence. I mean, something called a low iron glass, like white glass, super expensive. But because it's tilted, it reflects portions of the sky. So glass has that difficulty of having reflection, refraction, the shapes themselves. Sometimes they have a stain, sometimes they have color. Whereas the vertical glass that we have close to us that have the green tint, which is a commercial glass, which is normal, you can see through rather okay. So if you compare these two pictures, I mean, of the famous Villa Garges or Le Corbusier, I mean, the one on top is more transparent than the one in the bottom, right? More spatially transparent. The slot windows, the long windows, have reflection and they have curtains. If you follow that logic, that openings are key elements of perception and that part of transparency as well, then a forest is transparent. Because if you put glass between the trunks, you still see it through, equally transparent. Then I said, okay, I mean, how can I start studying this thing? And I went through, I mean, I don't know how many possibilities out there. How can I design or think about typologies of configurations that produce this effect in architecture or in environmental design, whatever these things occur? And then I came to reduce them to 10 because it's a good number to remember, and organize the second part of the book into these 4 groups. The first one, which is the extreme left, is spatial transparency in massive, opaque in configurations. Part 2 would be lighter elements. Part 3 is a spatial transparency in glass. Remember that literal transparency is one layer of glass, but spatial transparency, if there's a space between glass layers, then it becomes spatial again. And then the final one is a hybrid in which you can combine one or more of this. And so this is another of the posters that I have in the exhibit. But before I get too far, I mean, why is this relevant? I mean, and again, I mean, if you read the book, there'll be quite a few entries there. I mean, I'm just going to make it a little simpler because of time, and I put a few. I mean, at their best, configurations engendering spatial transparency promote more visually linked situations, favoring spatial interdependence, diversity, and embodied sensorial richness, which in turn enhance spatial interest and experience. By encouraging a shift of concern from isolated construct to connected spaces, these configurations weaken the object-food of forms, advancing instead openness, relationships, and environmental transactions. The second one is that these configurations support designs that interweave natural ecologies with the social, cultural, and infrastructural layers of the contemporary city. Spatial transparency could stimulate environmental awareness and responsibility by recognizing design realms as part of larger interconnected systems. And the last one, which I think is very interesting, is that at their best, I mean, these configurations enable the expansion of permeable realms by perceptually borrowing spaces from every possible surrounding source. By prolonging a sense of penetration into space through sequential disclosures, even in relatively confined realms, domains feel larger and more rewarding to reach. A wiser use of compact spaces will have a significant impact in a more sustainable future. This I learned actually from the Japanese. I mean, Japanese structure, the basic traditional structure, is quite open. I mean, they have sliding doors, and they can more or less rearrange the space very easily. But the spaces are very, very small. It's the openness that connect them from every source, and then have these borrowed sceneries that they get from gardens or from distant landscapes. And that actually helps quite a bit in making a small space feel larger. As we go into another situation with our environment, probably we're going to start shrinking a little bit of space, and that would be something interesting to consider. I'll run very quickly on the case studies. I'll go with one or two examples. The first one is what I call densely pillar and or arcaded spaces. These are usually slim vertical elements that are made in a grid. And those elements articulate space, divide space differently, and you can see through them. This could be a palm grove, or it could be a hypo-style building like this one here. This is a building that was not built by Heinrich Sessenau. But the forest of birch trees converts itself into then the building. I tried to put all the examples of places that I have been, that I have photographed and actually experienced, so that it has a sense of reality, I hope. This is the Mosque of Cordoba, which looks like a palm grove, and then the space is articulated. You can see through them. It's several layers are made, and then as you move, of course, the layers reconfigure. Very important in the business of spatial transparency is the issue of light. Because as the buildings grow, especially the case of mosques, the Mosque of Cordoba grew 4 times, they get separated from the exterior walls, and then the light from the windows cannot get through. So the light has to come from above, from clear stories or from skylights. Carved out volumes is different than layering. In this case, you're scooping out a mass of the building, taking away material. Layering, usually you add, and in this case, you subtract. Like the case of caves. This one in South Africa, you get a cave that looks into an opening and then further openings beyond. Now, buildings are not exactly carved out, but they may look like that. Like the TWA terminal by Sarinem, in which the building looks very much like it's been scooped out, and you get openings leading to other openings. And so is the case of Toyo-Ito, the Taichung Metropolitan Opera that was built, has a sense of porosity, you might say. Pierce layers are the more common, because most building components are planar, and these are openings in those components, like this house by Charles Moore in New Haven. Interesting then when you have contrast between the openings being square or rectangular, and then round, then the sense of depth is, if not intensified, at least you have more interest. And so was in Lukan National Assembly building in Chandigarh in Bangladesh. Corridors and light wells are similar to the pierced layers, but by having an opening, a pool of light comes in, and so animates the sense of depth. Like this building by Paulo Mendes da Rocha, the Pinacoteca in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. One corridor leads to another corridor, and then the sense of penetration and depth is there. This is very interesting in Milan. We visit with students when we go to Genoa, by Grafton Architects. The Bocconi University in Milan, it has 2 corridors at different levels. The first one is the entry corridor, and the other one in the middle left is a corridor that goes all the way to the bottom. And so the basement, which is usually a dark space, not very attractive, becomes actually a relatively nice space to hold groups and so on. And yet the whole building is very much open to each other in a layer configuration. Layer aerial stair ramps and bridges. I think the key word here is aerial, because these are elements that have to be disengaged, separated from the rest. And so space revolves around, like this building in Sao Paulo by Playa Arquitectura, the Centro Cultural Sao Paulo, in which these ramps are interspersed with each other. And they become like pieces of a stage set when they have theater performances below, then people can go into the ramps and see that from above. Similar to this one in Sao Paulo as well, by Lina Bobardi, is another cultural center. They have these bridges between 2 pieces of the building. On the left are sports arenas, on the right are the showers and the stuff that you need to keep calm in a moment when the sports are not there, the classrooms as well. Layer frameworks are similar to the pillar spaces, but much slimmer. And you have also horizontal elements, not just verticals, sometimes in the manner of platforms, sometimes in the manner of beams. Like this house in Yoshijima, in Takayama, Japan. Western trusses are usually triangular. And Chinese and Japanese trusses in traditional architecture are more like a three-dimensional grid, and they left it open, and so space gains from above. We normally cover our triangulated trusses. They don't look so nice. And so this idea was not lost completely in modern architecture. I mean, you have, again, So Fujimoto one more time, with the house NA, which is a very, very small project, I mean, 20 by 30, I think. It got 3 stories. And then it's like tatami mats that have been elevated into these extremely thin columns, 2 by 2. We use this project as a way to understand our studio. I mean, we have done this with Professor Andia. And of course, I mean, it's a very interesting thing to start thinking how Japanese design stuff, how they have been successful in doing small spaces look larger or intriguing. And so, I mean, if you are in our group, like Professor Kanabe likes to say, I mean, we also have plenty of stuff for you in terms of visits and design. Layer or porous screens, then the elements, physical elements become smaller and more numerous, and light can penetrate through them. Like this one here, I mean, which is in Gloucester Cathedral. I went to photograph this in December. I mean, very delicate stuff. I mean, this is something that they call traceries, which is ornamental stone open work. And a big building like this cathedral becomes, I mean, very delicate. I mean, once you start reducing the size of the elements and multiplying them. Not dissimilar to what happens in real landscape. We were saying that trunks of trees could be part of this idea of a spatial transparency, but also the branches and the leaves, except that they are much smaller and they are more numerous. This is in Corkscrew Swamp, which I recommend everyone to go and see it. Very beautiful. And then this idea of porosity and transparency is multiplied by the presence of water. Similar idea, I mean, with Kengo Kuma for Sunny Hills Pastry Shop. We go there when we visit Japan to this building. In wet light structures are even slimmer, I mean, and they have structural properties like this one by Fry Otto, I mean, in which you have now these tent-like elements floating in a space and producing spaces and subspaces that you can recede into depth. Layered glass organizations is at least 2 layers of glass. I mean, one layer would be literal transparency. And I have one that fits the diagram quite well. I mean, this is by Dan Graham. It's a rooftop installation in Manhattan. I went to see this with students. The key here is that the glass is highly reflected at the same time that it's transparent. And so what appears to be so simple, I mean, a rectangle with a cylinder, is actually composed of several surfaces. Each glass element has 2 surfaces, inside and out. And as you follow that in depth, then you can have 8 surfaces. And light can be striking at different points of one surface or the other, and shadows can be projected in one surface or the other. So when you are inside, man, it's a very incredible sense of space, because there are ghostly images floating around as you move around in space. And finally, hybrid configurations, they are very numerous, and you can have all kinds of combinations out there. Usually 2 or 3 is more than enough. It's like having too many colors or too many shapes. So I'm using my own work for this. And so this is the last part of the presentation with my professional practice. For the faculty members that have seen this work, I'm sorry, but I don't have, that much. I've done quite a few things, but not that many, and few that can fit as good examples for the lecture. So I'm going to repeat, at least for them, some of my work. But maybe because I'm doing a little more of an explanation, you can see this in a slightly different light. So the Hammond house is my own house. Hammocks are common in the Everglades. A hammock is an island of trees. And I thought that my house may have been part of that collection of hammocks. Maybe not. Maybe they're further down into the Everglades. But it was a good idea, that these hammocks have been destroyed as development comes in. My house is that black dot on the left-hand side. So I said, why not bring in the hammocks in again? Coconut Grove has done a little bit of that. So this is the house, and when I designed and it was being built, the walls and the trees were together. There were no trees. There was a barren site completely. The whole thing was planted from scratch. But I did something interesting, even in my own ways. I said, why don't I do the same value of trees than I do for the walls and leave the whole thing open so space can move around? And I transferred that even to a more abstract line diagram in which the walls have the same value of the trees. And so it's a completely porous process of moving through it. And I became obsessed with the idea of what you see, when do you see, how you move into space, how you move into various layers. I have this question, how can I orchestrate voids, openings, activities, and light? And I found a very intriguing system called ISOVIST. That's by a University of Texas professor as well. And ISOVIST is a point space in which 360 degrees radius, you have the sidelines going all the way to whatever stop element is. It could be a tree, it could be a wall, or it could be a boundary you set for yourself, which is the case here of the edges of my garden. And then it tells you with precision what goes through what, openings, trees, gaps, and so on and so forth. And so I could orchestrate a little bit of that, even with a little bit of movement. So I checked how many isovists could be moving in one side. With virtual reality, we can do some of that. But this gives you a good sense of control. That's what I like about it. And now it's computerized. It's a very simple app that you can download and use very, very, very quickly. So the ISOVIS from the living room, looking into the living room is here, and this is more or less what you see. This layering from front to back, and there's a layer on the sides, and then trees and architecture somehow partake in the phenomena. This is an ISOVIS from the garden into the house, and then the trunks of trees become a little bit the mullions of the house. The leaves of the trees and plants become the screen, and this is more or less what you see. And an ISOVIS from the library goes into the long corridor all the way in, and to the left to the garden and fountain and so on. The rain tree house was built in Managua. I had a client here, and she decided to go back and then asked me to do a house in which there was only a rain tree in a subdivision. So as a diagram, I made the rain tree have a counterpart with the water tower. The elements that you see in the middle, those are the tall volumes, then a corridor in a cross. And finally, the gardens it's a linear garden that coils into the tree, and this is one of the models. But what's nice about this house is that within the volume, there were sub-volumes, all of which animated with the light, direct light. Remember, spatial transparency would not exist without intermediate light. So I have all kind of trickery to get that light in. Light chimney on one hand, clear stories, skylights, all connected inside. And I was trying to replicate the effect of light of a forest in which there's only some points of light that pass through. Because this is the tropics, and the tropics, you cannot have extensive skylights. So all those diagrams that are there is the light bouncing in, coming from one part or another, and some of the interior elements are there, in all of which, are this trickery of getting natural light in. And this is the picture of the house. It's a strange house because it's a side garden. It doesn't have front yard or backyard. It's a side yard which is much bigger, and I can incorporate the tree there too. And this picture is the one that I used for the cover of the book. Playa Honda was built in Costa Rica. I met this client in New York. And a rich person, an industrialist in Costa Rica, and bought a fantastic property. I did this with a partner, Albert Knopfler, who was a classmate of mine and a good friend. I mean, the property is amazing, I mean, because the guy bought the entire area around the bay, and the house is built. This is what you see there, and very steep terrain, I mean, as well. When the owner approached us, he wanted to build in where you have number 2 towards the right up portion. He wanted to build a house there. And we said, no, don't do that. I mean, you're going to destroy a lot of trees. I mean, we were absolutely right there. And so there was a little bit of a clearing in the peninsula where the house was built, less destruction. But also there were some peculiarities that were very, very attractive for us. They wanted to have privacy. And so the trees will provide that privacy, but also it provides wildlife corridors. Plenty of wildlife there, I mean, monkeys, iguanas, you name it, on the tropics. And so having the trees will create this buffer area around. But then we noticed that you could see, I mean, from the house through the trees, I mean, like this diagram here. And the scale of the house was an open pavilion at the same height of the trees surrounding that. Now, if that was, I mean, tiring, and then we made a 3-story tower, I mean, and for a bar on top, you can see the sunset, and then you can regain view of the horizon above the canopy of trees. And this is the house that's built with the open pavilion on the left. And, well, this is important. This is the house in the rainy season. The rainy season is about 4 months, and the trees grow very lush with plenty of leaves. And the house is shut off from the ocean to a certain degree. But very few people go there because they are mosquitoes and rain. But we have noticed that in the dry season, then the trees shed the leaves, I mean, like a fall, and then opens up the landscape, which you see in this pavilion here. Or you can go to the edge of the cliff and have your barbecue there. The Oak House is one of my latest projects. It's in Coral Gables. And it started as a remodeling. I mean, the icons there is the stuff that I use for inspiration, the type of configuration that I use for inspiration. There was an existing house in the property, 2-bedroom, living, dining, and kitchen and garage. And the owners approached us to do a larger living room dining with a higher ceiling, and there was an oak tree. As time went by, they started growing. Put a new master bedroom, larger kitchen, and this took some time, 2-3 years. In time, they just made the house much larger. In every sense, and then there was no use for the existing. Unfortunately, they were keeping along the way how the first house looked, and the city of Coral Gables, as you may know, at least certain parts of that. Is difficult from the point of view of style, and so we were, in a sense, compressed with that. But at this point, I was sharing a studio with Professor Linda Chamorro, and I asked her for advice what to do with the garden. And she said, why don't you do, instead of one garden, several gardens? One room, one garden. Number 8 has the oak tree. Number 9 has a little bit of a tiny garden on the side. And as you go around the house, there's a garden per room, which I say is great, beautiful idea. Shared that with the owner. They loved it. But unfortunately, the owner had already, I don't know if a contract or an agreement with the landscaper, and then only portion of that was built as planned. But I like that a lot. And it's a little bit like that. And this is the interiors, which is what we did, mostly. And then the layer in here goes on 2 sides, vertically in the walls with large openings, and horizontally with the ledge that you have around. But remember that light is very important, and so there are 10 little windows that you don't see all around the roof area, and that creates light that bounces in that portion of the ceiling and illuminates the underside of the roof. And this is the living room looking into the guest bedroom, the area between living and dining, living and family, from family to living. This is a shot from the library up, and you see the layering of the track of light, and then the opening, and finally the ceiling and the kitchen. And this is, the last project I'm going to show you has been on and off for a while. It's in Nicaragua. I met the owner also in New York. He's a very successful financier. He had his own hedge fund and bought the property there. And we started some time ago. This is in a very beautiful location, San Juan del Sur. I'm very fond of this area because this is where I spent my teenage summers in there. It was much smaller. And the house is that tiny speck that you see there. I don't know if the pointer can be seen. Nope, it's okay. But you see a tiny speck in orange on the left-hand side. And that would be here. This is the way the house will have looked. And from the beginning, the idea was to merge with the landscape. I said plug into the landscape, like it was a plug going in, and then the first diagrams of the house was as the yin-yang thing, with spaces between the elements so light could be introduced. And almost literally, this is the first model that was made. The owners immediately said, no, you're using only half of the property, which they were right. I was using only half. There was an structure there on the left-hand side that I could use, and then at the end, it was recovered. And they didn't want to have the swimming pool next to the house because of noise and the kids playing and so on. I was also trying to get inspiration from the surrounding area. And these serrated lines that you see there can be in the lava rock, in the ocean, in the cliff. The wave pattern produces the same. So I incorporated that for retaining walls that not only create a rhythm, but also they are stronger. The section was very important because two members of this family were in wheelchairs. And on a steep slope, it was a complicated thing. So a good part of the study was to level the land, create the ramps. There was an elevator tower in the middle. More ideas about landscape and architecture, one influencing the other. How about if the slabs come from the trees somehow? And this is exactly the way that it developed at the end. A simple structure in concrete, local stone, lava and river stone, and this a tree called teca that they plant in southern Nicaragua and in Guanacaste in Costa Rica, and we could use that. At least that was the idea. The owner's wife is an artist, and her mother is an artist. And so we created studios for them. And the house looks pretty much like a very open collection of spaces, like a loft. But it could be closed with sliding doors that you see in the middle. The whole house could be closed off. And then I'm just going to run quickly on the last pictures of this house, as you go around, and then finally here. And then what you see there is very, very intense layering all the way from mountain to ocean, not dissimilar than what you see on the trees on the left. So to conclude, in summary, spatial transparency's graded assets are the potential shift of attention from objects to expanded ambient permeability and connectivity. Something I call spacescapes. If I write another book, it will probably be about that. And the facilitation of graded interflowing environmental transactions. So this is my last picture. Looking forward, I'll also look back to the beginning, to the layer and porous entanglements of nature, memory, and mind. Thank you. And now for the questions. Yeah.
The spatial transparency that you're talking, obviously light has a very big importance. How would you say that the light play relates to how you play with shadow in
Can we
This
pay
is a very
attention
nice
to the
question.
question, please? Hello?
If light is an essential element in the idea of spatial transparency, how do you play with shadows? Well, one is a result of the other. I mean, once you have the light, the shadow can be more or less understood. So understanding light is the first step. I mean, that's what makes spaces alive. But the shadow is a byproduct that is, in many cases, inevitable. And I think it's a very good question because you could have horrible shadows, and then light will not be so much of a use. I totally agree with you. Not only to study light, but shadows are part of the deal. Any other question? All right.
I have a technical question. Just a technical question. How many years to write the book? How many years of research?
That's a very good question. I think the book may have been in my mind for a long, long while. I remember that even before I went to master school, I went to the GSD, I already had this idea. And some of my design projects are there. I was already tinkering with this. But from one idea to make a book is a big, big difference. Defining things is not that easy. Remember, my native language is Spanish. Thank God there are dictionaries online that I could go with. I think it was COVID that really helped me because I had to be home. I didn't have to come to school. And then those 2 years were fantastic. I could really find the time to do it. All in all, I don't know. It depends on how you see it. It could be 10 years or it could be 3 years. But yeah, it was a long, long while. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So when you're designing something new, now that you have all these frameworks, do you choose, say, like, okay, I'm going to use 3 frameworks and then inspire your design based on that? Or how do you see your architecture after you've done all these studies?
Just asking if you select from the grid of options that you have, the frameworks, if you select when you're designing something new.
From which one?
From the pattern or the whole grid that you have.
Oh, yeah. Good. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. I couldn't get it completely. The icons that I have there, is a sampler, of many possibilities. Don't think that this is the end of it. This is the only way that you can, find these configurations. But it's a good one. They're very common. So it's not that I choose these things first. It's like you get inspired by design, and then you finding your way through the process. This thing come emerging little by little. And all of a sudden you say, okay, yeah, this is more like this particular configuration. I think that I'm answering your question. Yep. Yep.
So we talk a lot with the transparency, you can do things in layers and you can do things with glass, but there are some materials like you see now, like this really thin concrete, where only light comes through, and there's that element of transparency. Of the frameworks that you said, what do you think that really would apply to?
The question is with the new concrete that is translucent, if spatial transparency applies. Well, translucency is a different phenomenon. It works differently. It works on profiles, in shadows, but real vision doesn't go through. So you have to have a sensation of a series of spaces to really get the sensation of depth and the stuff that goes along with it. I have not talked about other aspects like parallax, but this is a more complicated deal that has to do with transparency or vision in movement. Which is, it's a pleasurable phenomenon. Like when you go in your car and then you see the objects close to you passing by very quickly, but the objects in the back, they are slower. In architecture happens something same. But I said this is even more complex. Let's stay with the basics. Yep. All right, thank you. There's an exhibit later on, and in the exhibit I have something that I did not include in the book, which is the process. I've been teaching this in courses that are elective about detailing, architectural detailing, in 2 different courses, design ecology and case studies in architecture. And I thought that was a good moment to show some of the process of my work. So you can see many of the elements that we discuss in class. So there'll be a whole section there about process that is not been part of the book at all. Thank you.